carrying coronaviruses of both and only two sexes? Well, it's a unholy Saturday. CNN has up as a front page item, in fact, masthead, that what really ails America. And essentially they say that, well, I'll just read you the couple paragraphs out of this article. It's the absolute stupid. The reason America has struggled to gain control of the new disease can be found at the intersection of politics, money, and culture, rooted in two defining traits of our society in the age of coronavirus: extreme political polarization and rising inequality. The former encompasses not just partisanship, but also related issues like hostility to the media, science, and civil servants. The latter is about the relationship between race and socioeconomic status and access to health care coverage. Excuse me? You know, the reason people are hostile to civil servants and so-called science is because it's wrong, repeatedly wrong, specifically in the context of coronavirus. These are the same civil servants and the same so-called science that told us that 2.2 million people in America were going to die as a result of coronavirus. We were going to have a death toll they were literally going to be stacking them up like cordwood. And then, then it was, 250,000 people. Wait, that was a factor of 10. What happened? Then it was 150,000, then it was 100,000, then it was 80,000, then it was 60-some thousand. Who knows what it'll be next time? The truth is a little something different, isn't it? And by the way, why would I have any belief in so-called science when you tell me that 2 million people are going to die and it doesn't happen? And don't give me this BS about how this all assumes that social distancing was going to hold throughout the entire period, because that's not what the study said. That's not what the model said. From the very first time it was run, the model said this assumes full social distancing through the end of May 2020. But, the media doesn't have to point that out. Why don't we trust the media? Well, because they lied about that too, didn't they? They didn't say the IHME model said that, well, this is assuming we'll have 2.2 million people dead if we lock the country down and if we have full social distance. No. They left that little part out. And what is this about access to health care being the cause? Did lack of access to health care result in people stuffing their face full of Cheetos and cakes and donuts? I mean, it's been a joke for years that police officers spend their time in the donut shop. Why? Because an awful lot of them are fat. Well, wait a minute. Isn't being fat and unphysically fit not so great if your police officer might have to chase a suspect? Oh, we have a radio. We don't need to do that. Besides, we have a gun. We can just shoot him. We don't have to actually chase anybody down anymore. We just shoot him. Or we'll send the dog. Because, we got a canine unit now. We don't actually have to do police work anymore. We don't have to go cuff and stuff the guy. We'll just send the dog. He'll bite him. So, what does any of that have to do with race? Well, absolutely nothing. Is it true that black people in Louisiana are more likely than white people in Louisiana to be disgustingly fat and have diabetes and hypertension? Probably. But does the virus care what color your skin is? No, not a bit. Do you choose what you put down your pie hole with your black, white, green, blue, Martian, whatever? Yeah, last time I checked. Every time you pick up that bag of Doritos, you make that decision. Is there something preventing people of color from eating, actual products that come from the earth instead of man-made garbage? No. No, it's not. Is there something preventing a black person from going running? No, that's not true either. In fact, one of the fastest runners in the Northwest Florida Track Club, who beats me regularly, is a relatively young black dude. And by God, is he fast. I'll never beat him. Yeah, right. If he was about 80, I might be able to beat him. Of course, by then I'd be like 135 or something like that, and I'd be dead. But, folks, it's just a load of bunk, okay? Is it about choices that people make? Oh, we can't go there, can we? Because if we go there, then we can't blame it on race. That's racist. Oh, yeah, okay. No, it's not. Then we have the other problem, which is that back when Kirkland happened, I said we have a vector issue. And this is one that's been known for a long time. C. diff is a very bad infection that goes around healthcare settings. It is almost always acquired in a healthcare setting, whether it be a nursing home or a hospital. It is a damnable bug that kills people on a fairly regular basis. There's a friend of C. diff's. I think it's Candida auroris. I think auroris is the last part of it. Anyway, that one it's a fungus. And it's especially nasty because it tends to be multi-drug resistant, which makes it very hard to kill. It laughs at most disinfectants. It is essentially universally acquired in hospitals, and it kills about half the people who get it. It normally only goes after people that have compromised immune systems because being a fungus, it's foreign enough that your body, if your immune system is working properly, will probably find it and knock it out before it gets you. But if it gets into your blood, then you're in big trouble because it causes a sepsis that is almost impossible to knock down simply because it's drug resistant. And it has an absolutely horrifying record of killing people. But, we don't talk about that. By the way, they've done studies where they've gone through and they've cleaned the living blankety blank out of every surface within a room and come back and then done cultures, and the only thing that was still there was that one. So, yeah, you only think coronavirus is bad until you start looking at that. So, the issue we continue to have with healthcare vectors, though, is in the nursing homes. And as I pointed out in an article I wrote about a week ago, there really isn't a coronavirus pandemic from a death and serious disease perspective in the general population. It's specifically among people with a large number of comorbidities and doubly specifically as an overrepresentation versus the population in skilled care facilities, nursing homes. And we've known this since Kirkland, and it goes back to what I've said about the civil servants and the Faucis and the Birxes and the CDC and the National Institute of Health and all these guys back in the early 1980s, which nobody will have any debate or discussion about. And notice I haven't been invited on any of the mainstream media folks. They all know who I am because I was on many of those shows during the 2008 crash. Why won't they have me on? Well, because I've been talking about this since it started, and they know exactly where I'm going to go the minute I get a word in edgewise. And frankly, if I was them, I'd be very afraid of that. So you're never going to hear this in the media. You'll hear people talking about, well, it's terrible, this loss of life that happened in the nursing home, but nobody's going to ever take the data and break it out. But even though it's trivially easy for you to do, folks, and you should, okay, MassWhole now has a set of statistics up that relate to this. And they have 41% of the people who have passed were nursing home residents, skilled or long-term, what they call long-term care residents. They don't break it out versus, and I don't know whether or not they consider old folks' homes to be part of this panoply or whether it's nursing homes. New York broke it out a little more specifically, but it doesn't really matter. The fact is that group of people is nearly half of those who have passed due to coronavirus, which means that we wouldn't have a critical care problem. We wouldn't have a hospital problem if we had slammed the door on that vector. And this goes back to what I have often said about AIDS with regards to the way that our government mishandled that. And they did it on purpose for political purposes. So if CNN wants to make an issue out of politics, they ought to make an issue out of politics in that context, because that's where it really is the truth and really is a problem. Specifically this. When you have a virus that there is no vaccine for, and by the way, there is likely to never be a coronavirus vaccine. Let's just make this clear. I've been saying this since the beginning too. There's no history in science of being able to come up with a coronavirus vaccine. Not in humans and not in animals. There is some evidence that people are pulling their hair out and, oh my God, my hair's on fire, out of South Korea, that perhaps people who have had coronavirus can get it again, that the immunity either wanes or they don't build much immunity in the first place. They have very low antibody counts. That is entirely possible, but it doesn't surprise. Okay, you can get more than one cold in a year, all caused by coronavirus. That does not surprise because this would fit with what we know about coronaviruses in general, and we know it from the animal husbandry business in particular because they keep having to reapply the prophylaxis And it's for the same reason. The antibodies wane, and they're not durable. It doesn't stick. Okay. Well, folks, that's not a reason for more lockdowns and tighter lockdowns. That's a reason to drop all of them because they're pointless. Think about it. If you can't possibly get to herd immunity because the immunity doesn't last, then we're all going to get it. We're all going to get it repeatedly. And in fact, what you want to do in that situation, the only sane course of action, is to let people get it. Why? Because the earlier, when I get it, it's either going to kill me or it's not. But waiting is not going to help because there is going to be no vaccine. And secondly, I want to get it early and often. And you say, Carl, you're crazy. No, I'm not crazy. I want it early and often. I want to get it. I want to get over it. I want to have some antibodies. And I want to have those antibodies the next time I get it. In other words, you don't want to prevent me from getting it the second time until all those antibodies are gone. You want me to get it the second time while I still have some antibodies because that gives me some resistance. Maybe not perfect resistance, but instead of running a fever and everything else, I get a minor little cold. I get some sniffles. And it's not so bad. And then when the immunity from it wanes, you want me to get it again. And you want me to keep doing this. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is you keep locking down the country every time we have one of these outbreaks. You're going to suppress that from happening. Now the antibodies are going to be gone. I'm going to get it, and by God, it's going to kill more people. Folks, this is basic epidemiology 101. All right, people, you have to stop being stupid. I mean, people want to know why we don't trust the so-called scientists and the so-called people that, the Faucis and the Birks and everything, because they have a history of doing stupid things. These agencies and these so-called public health people, they have a history of doing dumb things. We know this from the 1980s when AIDS first showed up. They refused to close the bathhouses. Why? Because we had a mayor in San Francisco who was afraid that she'd lose her job. She's now a senator. Did she lose her job? No. How many people did we shove in the hole unnecessarily? If we closed the bathhouses, would we have stopped all of the death? Well, of course not. The virus doesn't care whether or not you... they don't care about your politics. Viruses could care less. They have not a care in the world. However, you would have cut the transmission down. The exponential expansion wouldn't have been nearly as strong. And as a result, probably half the people who got shoved in the hole with AIDS wouldn't have died. Exactly how many, I don't know, because we never did shut it down, so we couldn't see what the transmission efficiency drop would have been. But the other thing that goes with this, folks, is that these claims out of Vanderbilt with regards to Tennessee that this thing has an R naught of 5, that's not been. There's no observational evidence for that anywhere in the world. I have the Tennessee daily data on cases going all the way back to when they had single digits, and it's public. Anybody can look it up. It's stick it in a spreadsheet, folks, and start doing retrospective R calculations. It's not hard. Okay, it's simply percentage growth over a 5-day period from previous. And add 1 to that because one at 1.0. If you have a number that is less than 100% over that time, then you're under 1.0. All right, because we know the generation time, the cycle time, if you will, this virus is about 5 days. All right, now maybe that cycle time's off a little bit. Maybe it's 4 days, maybe it's 6 days. I mean, listen, we don't know exactly what the time is, but 5 is a decent guess from the evidence, the various evidence we have around the world, and that's all you have outside of controlled conditions, which you're never going to get for a virus in the wild. And it says that there was never anything more than a little over 2. The highest that we saw, by the way, was up in New York, which was about 3. I haven't looked at Massachusetts. It'd be kind of interesting to do that because, and I may have to, because Massachusetts appears to have a huge problem with the healthcare vector within these nursing homes. But Sweden's has been stable right around 1.5, and now it's starting to come down too. Why? Well, Sweden didn't lock down. Oh, wait a minute. Then how is Sweden's curve changing? Well, Sweden had herd immunity. They had it early. Now it's starting to press downward on the rate of transmission, just like it is for us. The date on which this rollover happened in every U.S. state and nationally is all centered around a period of time in early March. And it takes 5 to 10 days for that to show up in the numbers. You can make the argument, as I have repeatedly said on these podcasts, that the original action that was taken with the lockdowns, at the time it was done, you could make an argument that this looked logical because it appeared that R was accelerating. That's very bad. Okay, and that would imply that we were seeking R naught essentially. Okay, R is a variable. R naught is the absolute percentage transmission in a 100% susceptible population, which of course never happens. As soon as the first case occurs, the entire population isn't susceptible anymore. But R is a variable, and it looked like we were maybe seeking that nasty R naught above 3. And so if you if you're there, you can make that argument. But within days, certainly before Trump's original 15 days to slow the spread, it was evident that we actually top ticked the R value. And it couldn't have been the lockdowns and the social distancing guidelines that caused it because they hadn't gone into effect yet. It never ceases to amaze me that you have people in the media and elsewhere who will try to claim that something is responsible for something else when the something that could have caused it hasn't occurred. Today, as I go out to get my mail, I get struck by a meteor. And because I went to go get my mail, I got struck by the meteor. No, the meteor was going to strike at that particular time in that particular place, whether I was there to get hit by it or not. Now, my getting hit by it may have been because I happened to be standing there at that moment in time, but I didn't cause the meteor to appear. I can't have done that. First off, the meteor existed long before I decided to go get the mail, and it's an independent. All right, so I couldn't have done that. When you start talking about, people say, well, the lack of health care caused you to get fat and diabetic. Excuse me? The lack of health care caused me to get fat and diabetic? The lack of a doctor made me put stupid things down my pie hole? No, maybe all of the people telling the rest of us in society for the last 20 or 30 years that calling somebody fat is mean and we can't do that because it's a microaggression and it's a social, you can't do that. You cannot call people fat if they're fat. By God, shaming them will never change their behavior. Oh, wait a minute. Shaming people has always been an effective way to change people's behavior. If you get shunned socially because nobody wants anything to do with you, because you're a disgusting pig, that doesn't give you a reason to change your behavior? Well, for some people it won't, but for others it will. So if we had changed to 20 or 25% of people's behavior, and those people were no longer fat and diabetic, they wouldn't be dead now, would they? Probably not. Boy, ain't that a bitch. Well, who is it that made the decision to do those things? Why is it that all of a sudden this is, we can't look at the actual backward sociological factors that led to this. We can't do that. We can't take all of these causes and actually run them to the ground. And by God, it is absolutely unacceptable that we look at the transmission in these healthcare environments, especially for people who are most disadvantaged, seniors in nursing homes, and we cannot run those to the ground and stomp them. Well, we didn't do the same thing during AIDS, folks. The very same social experts, the very same so-called epidemiological experts, the very same people from the CDC and the NIH and all the letters after their names, the Faucis and the Birxes, okay, refused to chase vectors and stomp on them. You want to know what we could have done the minute that we found out that Kirkland was a major vector out in Seattle? We could have demanded that every single nursing facility have a secure building where everyone who works there has to live until this thing is over. Because we know it's a highly infectious disease. We know that it has two vectors. One of them is nasal. It's from respiratory droplets. The other one's out your butt. And we know that that's a problem in nursing homes because there's an awful lot of incontinent people in nursing homes. And so what we could have said was, look, if you work in a nursing home, here is a hotel that we're going to rent that's next door. There's going to be a bus that has nobody on it except, a little shuttle bus that has nobody on it except people that work in this nursing home. That the only people who are going to get on or off this, the only people who are going to be in that hotel are people that are either seropositive and converted or people who, there's a green zone and a red zone, right? All your food's going to be brought in. That's it. You order whatever the blankety blank you want, but it's going to be dropped at the front door. And then, we're going to, put it over by the elevators, come down and get it. And that's how it's going to be until this thing's over. And you say, well, they'd all quit. Well, okay. Then we'll hire other people to do that job, and we'll pay them more money. And there will be people who will do that job for some amount of money. All right? And we're going to do that for all of these skilled nursing facilities and all these residential nursing homes until this thing is over. And when is it going to be over? Well, I don't know that it's ever going to be over, actually, which leads to another problem, which is, well, what do you do if it never goes? Well, you let this thing go through the community, you let the herd immunity build, and hopefully it becomes a low enough nuisance level factor that we don't have to worry about it so much anymore in these nursing facilities. Maybe. And maybe that never happens. Maybe it just turns out that if you happen to end up in one of these skilled nursing facilities, the 6-month average that you have before you expire, which, by the way, is the number, becomes 3 months. And that's really sort of sad, but I don't know that we actually could solve that. But instead, we lock the entire country down and we scare everybody because, by God, everyone's going to die. No, you're not. Are there going to be people who are otherwise healthy that get hit by this thing and end up dead? Well, yes, but that happens all day long, every day. 7,700 Americans, folks, die of various things. All right, not including coronavirus. 7,700, over 7,000, almost 8,000. And the reality is that if you do not have these comorbidities, your all-cause risk of death is considerably higher than it is for coronavirus in every age bracket. So, some perspective is called for here. But, of course, you can't do that in today's world and have any kind of reasoned argument with anybody because you're called oh, my God, the screaming Karens come out. And this is a racial problem. Now, that's the latest thing. This has now started up. You have the CNN and the other people. And isn't it so convenient who raised that in the press conferences first? An obese black lady brought it up first. I remember seeing it. I said, oh, gee, isn't that interesting? We're, as someone who is in a so-called protected class, because nobody can say, hey, Chickie, Trump, what's he going to do? Stand up to him and say, hey, Chickie, why don't you go lose 50 pounds? You wouldn't be so fat. You wouldn't have... By the way, you wouldn't be diabetic, would you? I get it, folks. Making light of this is actually not funny. But we have to focus on where the science and where the facts take us. And where the science and facts take us is that social distancing and lockdowns did absolutely nothing to change the trajectory of this disease. Sweden proves this. The reason everybody's after Sweden right now is because they know the data proves this. And that if Sweden keeps this up, and they are starting now to see the suppression from herd immunity too, starting to show up in their numbers, just as it's showing up in ours. All right, they were sitting almost a flat line at a 1.5 effective transmission rate R for quite a while. Now they're coming down. The last couple sets of numbers I saw are now in the 139, 14 area. You got to be a little careful with them because they're a couple days behind. It's just their statistics collection is done differently than ours. So when they have case counts, I have to go back and I have to look at them for about a week after the original report for a given day because they get added back into the correct bucket later on. So if you had a positive test today, for example, that's reported today, the positive test might have happened on Thursday. And so if you're not cautious with how you do the data collection for them, you'll miss that. And the first few days that I was running these charts, I was missing that a couple times. And I went back and looked at it and said, wait a minute, that's wrong. And so you have to be a little cautious with the far right end of their chart, okay? Because that number is always going to be low and then it gets picked up a little bit. But the fact is that all of these are converging in the same place, and yet we're all taking different steps. You look at Tennessee, for example. You look at Texas. You look at New York. You look at Michigan. You look at all these states. Now, I haven't run Michigan yet. I'm probably going to have to, but I did Illinois, which is right next door. And Illinois, of course, is getting hammered really badly. And all of these, including New York, are all converging in the same place. And yet they have very different policies. Well, viruses don't care about policies. Viruses care about facts. And the fact is that we're just not being efficient at doing this as a result of these so-called guidelines. It's not happening. That's not the reason. Can't be because, first off, the rollover happened in front of the action. Therefore, it can't be the cause. And secondly, it's consistent regardless of the fact that we have different actions. So that's not the cause. So all of these so-called distancing guidelines and lockdowns, they did nothing. They're not responsible for any of this. And we have two possibilities that are remaining. One is that we're the spiky parts of the transmission curve, i.e. in nursing homes, we're running out of suckers. Despite the fact that we keep getting the reports in different skilled facilities, this is really macabre, but it may be true. We're killing all the grannies and grandpas. And the virus is running out of suckers in those places. The people who get it and don't get sick, which by the way does happen among old people, as I've pointed out. Of course, they've got antibodies. They're now immune. So the virus goes ripping through one of these old folks' homes. It kills half the people in it. The other half survive, but nobody's doing serological tests on the other half to see whether or not they got it or not and converted. And that's why they didn't die, because they got it and they're now for at least some period of time they're immune, and so they're going to be okay. And yet the other half of the people in the nursing home are dead. And that's why we're seeing the fall off, because those extreme overrepresentations, even though it's a very small piece of the population, when you've got a 5,000% overrepresentation, it's going to bump your numbers. Okay, and it's going to have a pretty decent effect too, simply because the overrepresentation is so large. And that is likely what we're seeing here. That's the one explanation. The other one for the spiky stuff is that we're building immunity faster than we thought we were. It wasn't there, but it was building and going through the population much faster than we believed. And I think there's a combination of those things. As I said, since I began these podcasts and started covering this, folks, it is my belief that R is actually a composite. It's a polynomial, probably a binomial or trinomial, that atmospheric droplet transmission is quite inefficient, but fecal-oral is extremely efficient. And therefore, when you have places where that second level of susceptibility in the healthcare environment and in the nursing homes is high, you're going to get extreme levels of transmission, and that's going to skew your numbers. And among the general population, you're not, because that doesn't happen so much among the general population. And therefore, among the general population, you don't get high transmission. And that also, again, means the lockdowns and the shelter-in-place orders are dumb because they did nothing. We're now seeing it in the data. The confirmation of the thesis is there. All right, so why aren't the so-called scientists, why aren't the so-called civil servants, and you want to know what the answer is, folks? When was the last time you ever heard anybody in civil service or in politics say three simple words? I was wrong. Let me take a guy.